The Pacific War lasted from December 8, 1941 to September 2, 1945. Japan calls this the Great East Asia War. Japan, which was at war with China due to the Manchurian Incident and the Sino-Japanese War, planned to advance south to break the deadlock in the war and acquire resources in Southeast Asia.
To this end, the Triple Alliance was signed with Germany and Italy in 1940, and on December 8, 1941, Japan provoked the Pacific War by surprise attacking Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Japan occupied the Philippines, the Malay Peninsula, Singapore, and Burma just half a year after the start of the war, and then advanced into New Guinea and Guadalcanal Island, threatening even Australia.
However, in June 1942, in the Battle of Midway with the United States, the counterattack suffered serious damage, losing 4 aircraft carriers and losing control of air and sea one after another. Following the recapture of Saipan and the Philippines in 1944, the United States landed on Okinawa in April 1945 and conducted airstrikes on the Japanese mainland. When Germany surrendered in May of the same year, Japan insisted on decisive battle on the mainland, but atomic bombs were dropped one after another on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6 and 9th. And the Soviet Union participated in the war against Japan. Finally, on August 14th, the Emperor accepted the Potsdam Declaration calling for unconditional surrender and announced it on August 15th. Then on August 30th, American troops landed on the Japanese mainland, and on September 2nd, on the US battleship Missouri, signed the surrender document and the war ended. This war was characterized by looting and atrocity in the Japanese army occupied territories and the thorough destructive operation of the United States against Japan. During the war, millions of Koreans were dragged into forced labor, female slavery, and being student soldiers by the Japanese imperialists, resulting in many deaths.
The Pearl Harbor attack. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack by Japan on December 7, 1941, against the U.S. Pacific Fleet anchored in Pearl Harbor on Oahu, Hawaii. Shortly after this surprise attack, the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands declared war on Japan.
Taking advantage of the outbreak of World War II and the capture of France by Germany, the Japanese army advanced into Indochina at the end of July 1941. As the U.S. protested fiercely and imposed economic sanctions, including an oil embargo, Japan preemptively attacked Pearl Harbor without a declaration of war on December 7, 1941, to neutralize the Pacific Fleet anchored in Pearl Harbor.
6 Japanese aircraft carriers carrying a total of 450 aircraft approached the Hawaiian waters and attacked Pearl Harbor. As a result, 5 of the 7 American battleships at anchor were sunk, more than 200 aircraft were destroyed, and more than 2,000 people were killed. After defeating the U.S. naval forces in this way, Japan easily occupied Singapore, the Philippines, and Indonesia. For this reason, the United States broke neutrality and entered World War II, and the Pacific War escalated. As a result, World War II spread throughout the world. Since China was already at war with Japan, military cooperation between the United States, Britain, China, and the Netherlands against Japan was established in the Asia-Pacific region. On the 11th, 4 days after the United States declared war on Japan, Germany assisted Japan as a member of the Berlin-Rome-Tokyo Axis and declared war on the United States, followed by Italy. On July 1st of the following year, 26 countries including the United States, Britain, China, and the Soviet Union signed the Allied Declaration, and it became clear that the nature of this war was a confrontation between the Allied powers as the democratic camp and the Axis powers as the fascist camp. With the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan began to take control of the sea by sinking 2 new British battleships in the waters of the Malay Peninsula. The sinking of the Prince of Wales and the repulse was a naval engagement in World War II. It occurred on 10th December 1941 in the South China Sea off the east coast of the British colonies of Malaya and the Strait settlements as a part of the war in the Pacific. While this event involves an attack by the Japanese army, it's undeniable that their prowess and magnificence deserve acknowledgement. Japan's capability to successfully assail and sink a British naval warship in an era when the British was famously described as one where the sun never set is undeniably awe-inspiring. The Prince of Wales and battlecruiser Repulse was sunk by land-based bombers and torpedo bombers of the Imperial Japanese Navy. At the same time as the start of the war, the army landed on the Malay Peninsula and the Philippines, occupied Singapore in February 1942, and surrendered the British Far East forces, while occupying Sumatra and Java Islands to defeat the Dutch forces. The Japanese then invaded Myanmar and captured Yangon. However, the stalemate continued on the Chinese front, the main battlefield, and China's anti-war system was gradually strengthened. Leadership in the Pacific also passed to the US military at the turning point in the Battle of Midway in June 1942. The war ended on August 6 and 9, 1945, after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and on the 15th, the Emperor declared unconditional surrender. As a result, Korea was liberated from Japanese colonial rule.
Hi, Tony. There are no assumptions in history, but what would the world be like if Japan had won the Pacific War and the United States had lost?
It is impossible to say for certain what the world would be like if Japan had won the Pacific War and the United States had lost. However, there are some possible scenarios that could have played out. Japan would have become a hegemonic power in the Pacific. Japan would have been able to control the resources and trade routes of the region, and it would have been in a position to dictate terms to other countries. The Cold War would have been fought between Japan and the Soviet Union. The United States would have been weakened by its defeat, and the Soviet Union would have become the dominant power in the world. The world would have been a more militaristic place. Japan's victory would have emboldened other militaristic countries, and there would have been a greater risk of war. The development of democracy and human rights would have been delayed. Japan's victory would have been a setback for democracy and human rights, as it would have shown that force can be used to achieve political goals.
These are just some of the possible scenarios that could have played out if Japan had won the Pacific War. It is impossible to say for sure what the world would be like, but it is clear that the world would be a very different place. It is also important to note that the United States was not the only country that was opposed to Japan's expansionism. China, Great Britain, and the Netherlands were also fighting against Japan.
If Japan had won the Pacific War, it is likely that these countries would have been forced to make concessions to Japan. This could have led to a more divided and unstable world.
Ultimately, it is impossible to say for certain what the world would be like if Japan had won the Pacific War. However, it is clear that the world would be a very different place. Thank you for watching the video, The Pacific War, provided by History and Current Events. Gina, Bella, Cindy, Helena, Tony have contributed so far as narrators. Thank you.